Hey there, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Travis's Tip of the Day. Today it is episode 19, I believe. And man, time sure flies when you do things like this and you can see how quickly your episodes stack up. I hope you're finding value in it. Let me know if you want me to cover any particular subject in general. Today, it's going to be quite a special episode because I have Andrew Lima with us, a senior developer at Paid Memberships Pro. And we are going to be speaking a little bit about Stripe webhooks and the importance of them. And also, Andrew might demonstrate how to actually go ahead and set up your Stripe webhook. But before we dive in, Andrew, how are things? How are you doing today?
Hey, Trav, things are good and by your side?
Yeah, no, everything's going well, thanks. So, Andrew, can you tell us, like, sort of with a broad overview for those who are using Stripe, etc., what is a Stripe webhook? Why do you need it? Or any valuable information that we might need to know about?
Cool. All right. So Stripe for Paid Memberships Pro, we use a webhook method, which is basically a page that catches communication notices inside Paid Memberships Pro that come from Stripe. And it's really important to have a webhook set up. It's required, it's not optional, to handle the recurring payments. If a payment fails over at Stripe for a customer, maybe their card is out of funds or their card's expired and it hasn't been updated. Stripe will then send a notification to the webhook in Paid Memberships Pro, and it'll either cancel their membership, it'll cancel their membership, or it will send through information saying hey, we did process this customer's credit card, everything's okay, create an order inside Paid Memberships Pro and let them continue their membership further. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Stripe in recent weeks and months has updated how their webhook works, or, has there been any specific updates made to Stripe or the webhook specific to Stripe, etc., that we might need to know about and the reason why we're making this video?
I don't think there's any changes for existing PM Pro users that will need to, update their webhook settings. In this video, we'll cover basically what events that are needed for the webhook. It's known as events, or you can call them triggers. So basically, like I mentioned, if the charge gets failed, you need that event to tell Stripe, hey, when this event happens, send a notification to Paid Memberships Pro. So some of that did change a little bit. But if you already had a webhook set up pre 2020 or early 2020, I don't think you'll need to make any changes. It may be good just to double check that you either have all events set up or the required events that Paid Membership Pro needs to receive those notifications and handle those notifications. I will be going over it, so don't worry too much.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So if you are watching and you have any questions while Andrew gives us a little bit of a walkthrough through the Stripe webhook setup, please drop a comment down below and then I will pass it on to Andrew. Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and share your screen.
Cool.
And that should be displayed on the stream now. So yeah, take it away, Andrew.
All right. So since Paid Memberships Pro, I want to say 2.3, 2.4, we made it a lot easier for website owners to actually automatically create the webhook. We noticed that a lot of users were setting up Stripe but not setting up their webhook, or it wasn't clear to them that they had to set up a webhook. If you want to read our documentation, you can just go to paidmembershipspro.com/gateway/Stripe. Or in the menu where it says gateways, you can just head over down to Stripe and then select the gateway setup tab. This will kind of tell you how to set up Stripe from the very beginning, like what keys you need, like your secret key and your publishable key. And you just follow the steps. Stripe is one of the more easier ones to set up in the payment gateways. I find it's a lot fewer steps to get set up. So we're just going to cover the new feature of setting up your webhook URL. Again, we try to make this easier for admins and site owners to actually just, click a button and your webhook setup. Before, you'd have to log into your Stripe account. You'd have to, navigate to the webhook URL or the webhook option in Stripe, copy over the URL that you want to send the notifications to and what events you want. So again, we try to reduce this support or issues that users were facing. A lot of the times people would come to our support and say, hey, my recurring orders aren't being created inside Paid Memberships Pro. I'm using Stripe. And 90% of the time is your webhook wasn't set up correct or your webhook events were missing. So again, we just try to make this easier for the user. As we saw, it was a bit of a pain point in setting up the Stripe payment gateway. I mentioned earlier there are 4 event triggers or events or actions that Stripe and Paid Memberships, that Paid Memberships Pro is required to, or listens for, required to, it's required for Paid Memberships Pro to work, in other words. So it's the charge failed, customer subscription deleted, invoice payment action required, and invoice payment succeeded. You can search Stripe's documentation to see what exactly each of these do or when it runs. Most of them are self-explained, like if the charge gets failed, if the payment goes through, if there's a payment, if there's an action on the payment that's required, or if their subscription gets deleted. So for example, if you had to delete the subscription inside Stripe, it will send a notification to Paid Memberships Pro to say like, hey, the subscription's been deleted. Can you just handle it a bit? If you need a bit of help, there's a video that we've set up that will kind of walk you through what I'm going to do now. And yeah, so this is just kind of a good guide to follow when you're setting up or testing Stripe on your gateway, or on Paid Memberships Pro, should I say. It gives you like the test cards and stuff that we're going to use. I'm going to be sharing my test Stripe account, or my sandbox as it's known. So don't worry, nothing's going to be processed in this process. It's just going to simulate a transactional checkout for that. So what I've done is I've already entered my secret and publishable keys inside my dummy Paid Memberships Pro test site. Again, these are test keys. I know you're not supposed to be sharing them too much, but I don't have a live Stripe account, so this isn't gonna charge anyone, or anyone, if they copy this information, it's not gonna charge, or steal information from our account. So what I've done was, initially I just set up Stripe, I set it to sandbox and testing. You will have to, I believe you'll have to regenerate your Stripe webhook if you're on the live account. So if you're testing on sandbox and you hit create webhook, you may need to adjust your Stripe webhook inside Stripe, and I'll show you like what to look for inside the Stripe dashboard. So I've entered my publishable key and my secret key. As mentioned before, you would have to copy this full URL and paste it in Stripe. But now, since a later version of Paid Memberships Pro, all you got to do is click create webhook and wait a bit. And there you go. The webhook is enabled. You don't actually have to save your settings again. It would be good to just save it if you haven't saved your publishable keys. And yeah, so this basically created a webhook in Stripe now. And if you go over to your Stripe account, you'll go to developers. Let me just zoom in for you so it's a little bit.
And just to make mention, because we do get asked about it a couple of times, under their developers tab, you will notice that it has API keys as well as webhooks. And the API keys is where you find the publishable and secret key, as you can see over there. So that's actually how you connect your Stripe account to your Paid Memberships Pro payment gateway settings. And then, yeah, Andrew was about to show us the webhook section. So
yeah, so if you notice the previous screen, it said there was no webhook setup or endpoints. This is basically your webhook URLs. that's because I had the page open. So I just had to refresh it to get it to show. So in your endpoints, if you click the URL, it will show you endpoint type accounts. As long as it's enabled, we're good, yeah. Mode test, the version is the API version that Stripe's going to use. And as you can see, it automatically created your event types and assigned it to your webhook. We try to make it a bit clever that if you already had a webhook set up, it will try and see what events you have and if there's any missing events, or if these particular events are missing, it will add them to your already existing webhook. With that being said, you can run multiple webhooks in Stripe, even to the same URL. We kind of just figure out the first one, store that ID in the database to reference that. And then we look against that specific webhook ID. So if you can have like 10 of these webhooks, which in theory you shouldn't. You should rather have one webhook with multiple event types for whatever reason you think. You can also have multiple webhooks pointing to a different URL for the same site. So if you're using Paid Memberships Pro and say WooCommerce, and WooCommerce also needs a webhook URL, most likely their webhook URL is going to be a different URL. So that's okay. It will just run in conjunction. Basically, it will say like, if this event gets triggered, send it to this URL, which is the page that Paid Memberships Pro built to handle these particular actions. With that being said, what you can do is, if you notice for whatever reason some of these events are missing, you can just select the update details here by the webhook details, and then you can add a description if you're running multiple webhooks, or you can even select an event. So this is great for developers if you want to leverage our webhook handler. You can basically say like, if there was a charge dispute created, just cancel the membership, for example. You'd have to code that in. It's not built in by default. These are the 4 default events that Paid Memberships Pro handles, but it just gives you the option, to say like, hey, I want to also add an extra event type or need an extra event type for whatever reason. So it does give you the flexibility for that. The logs and the webhook attempts, you won't get anything from the beginning. This will only be when the subscription is charged. And this is handled all by Stripe. So if a membership checks out for your membership, that's a 1-month recurring membership level, they will be billed basically a month later, and then you should get the webhook attempts here. If it'll give you succeeded and failed. If the webhook failed, maybe you had the wrong URL, or you're missing an event type, or something like that. It fails for whatever reason, and then you rectify the webhook URL or the event types, there will be an option here to resend a failed webhook attempt. This won't recharge the customer. It won't like bill them twice. It will basically just say like, hey, resend this notification to my webhook URL, or try to at the very least, and then it'll either succeed or fail. So if it's still failing, there's probably something on your site's end that is interfering with this. And then I guess reach out to support to let us, help troubleshoot this. But the most important keys here for the Stripe webhook is to make sure you have these 4 events selected, or if you're running an older webhook, or your webhook was created at an older time or a later stage, and you've been running a webhook for quite some time, the event types might have something that's all events. And I don't think I can bring this up. There's a way Stripe used to allow you to select this all events. I think it was like all.events or all_events. And if you created your webhook in an earlier period, it would probably have that selected, which is okay. It's basically selecting all these triggers, but Paid Memberships Pro is smart enough to only handle these 4 triggers that matter to our system. So I can probably run a test checkout. I think that would make some sense. All right, so I've got a test account here. I've set up a $5 per month subscription. I've set up my webhook now. I'm going to use, again, test credit card details.
And these, just for those watching, these test credit card details are specific to Stripe, if I'm not mistaken, Andrew.
Yeah.
You actually, if you have the Stripe payment gateway set up, you can't just enter any old dummy information. It has to be this that is on the screen at the moment. As you can see, the specific card numbers, etc. Does the expiration date in that matter, or is it, do you only need to get the card right, Andrew?
Okay, so these are test cards that you can use for successful checkouts. The expiration date does have to be a present or future date. You can't do like the second month of 2019. I'll show you what happens just for interest sake. You can use any 3 digits or 4 digits for American Express. I suggest checking out the Stripe documentation for the test cards. There's a link on our documentation page. There's ways to also simulate like a failed checkout if you want to test, a failed payment or a failed card for whatever reason. It gives you a bit more flexibility when testing your payments before going live. So where it's membership checkout. So if, for example, if I had to go the second month, so February of 2020, it's going to highlight red and it'll throw an error. So I won't be able to check out. So I'm just going to make it a future date. The CVC number or CVV number, some companies refer to it. It's any 3 digits for a test account. So it's 3 numbers at the back of your card. Don't share that with anyone. And yeah, so let's just simulate a checkout quickly. So it's going to create a subscription for $5 per month. I'll maybe also just cover something that comes up a lot as like a bit of a bonus thing because we're motoring through this quite quickly. Okay, cool. So the checkout was successful. I got my order. You can double check that if you go to orders, premium. As you can see, we saved the last 4 digits just for reference. Here's our payment ID and our subscription ID that Stripe references. So again, Paid Memberships Pro doesn't store a full credit card information, like a full credit card details. We only store the last 4 digits, and then we use the subscription ID to reference the payments and the orders for PCI compliance and security reasons. That sometimes comes up in questions that, do we store credit card information on the site? No, we do not. We only store the last 4 digits, which is PCI compliance, if I believe is the case, just for referring like, oh, okay, the user paid with, a card that ended in 4242. We don't store the, the expiration dates on the card, the CVV number or anything of that. We also use SCA, which is the Stripe Secure Authentication or something like that. We've got guides on that, which was a requirement of Stripe, I think earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Stripe. I think Stripe is our most updated gateway throughout Paid Memberships Pro, and we've got some neat features that are coming out in the near future, hopefully end of this year or early 2021. All right, so now that the payment and the subscription was successful, you can head over back to your Stripe dashboard, and I believe if you go payments, just give it some time to load. As you can see, here's the last US $5 payment. So what happens in the back end for interest sake with Stripe and recurring subscriptions is we break we break it into 2 payments. We set the initial payments as an immediate payment now, and then what we do is we create the subscription, which I'll show you now, to be, for example, this was a month membership, so it'll be a month from today. So the 10th of October should be the next payment date. And so what comes up in support, let me just pull it up quickly. I think it's customers, subscriptions. Yeah, there we go.
Andrew, can I just interject here real quick? So everyone who is joining the live stream, I've got Andrew Lima here, a senior developer at Paid Memberships Pro. We're talking a little bit about Stripe and Stripe webhooks for the most part, but Andrew is thoroughly going into more details about Stripe, getting set up with it, troubleshooting it to a degree, and just making sure that everything is running pretty well. So if you do have any questions, this is a live stream. Pop them down in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to ask Andrew. We're probably going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. So get your questions in quickly if need be. Cool. Andrew, thanks.
Cool.
I'll just go ahead and share your screen again.
Yeah, no worries. So I was just saying that in recurring payments, we split the payments into two. So the initial payment gets charged immediately, and then we create a subscription inside Stripe. And what happens is some people get confused by this trial ends, status in Stripe. And this is default behavior of Stripe. It's not that saying that, the customer didn't pay. What this status means is the subscription was created for a future date, but it hasn't been processed yet. This is known as a trial in Stripe. So for example, the membership that I just checked out for was, we got billed $5 immediately. It reflects in our Stripe account. And if I go check the user subscription that was created with it, it shows that the trial ends on 10th of October. So that doesn't mean that the subscription is going to end. The user's in a free trial period. It's just a status that Stripe uses to say like, hey, this subscription is going to be processed on the 10th of October. So that's why it's just saying the trial ends on the 10th of October. Once the payment has been processed, it will automatically change to this active status. So it's nothing to be alarmed about if you see like, oh, I've got 50 trials that are ending, on 18th of September, next year, July, the 29th of July, or, a new subscription that just came in that's a month out or a week out or a year out that says like, hey, they're in trial. You've accepted the payments and the payment's been processed initially, so you get that funds immediately. And then this just says, hey, we create a subscription that is going to be processed by the 10th of October or whatever date your membership level set up. And then once it's processed successfully, it shifts to an active status. If it fails, I don't think I've got a failed subscription. The status will probably change. Let's see, canceled. So if the user cancels, it will just change the canceled to canceled status inside Stripe. So that's just to clear up some questions that come around that. I see it come in every now and then that's saying like, hey, I don't run a trial, but Stripe says I'm running a trial. It's just, it's just the status that Stripe uses. And there's no way around it as far as I know. It might be good if someone from Stripe sees this video, maybe change it from trial to like scheduled next payment to the 10th of October or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's nothing to be concerned about.
Cool. Andrew, thank you very much. That was a wealth of information about Stripe webhooks, how to get set up, how to sort of like validate and sort of, just understand the data on the Stripe dashboard. Andrew, I don't see any questions, so I think you obviously explained everything pretty well. Thank you for joining me today on Travis's Tip of the Day. And I will see you back here tomorrow for TTD episode number 20. It's been a lot of fun. And Andrew, once again, thank you very much, and I'll see you later.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, everyone.